I stared at my phone in disbelief, scrolling through Instagram where my sister Jessica had just posted engagement photos with the caption, "Save the date." My own sister was getting married, and I was finding out on social media. When I called my mother to ask about the invitation, her words cut deeper than any knife could. "Sorry, dear. This event is only for the closest people," she said casually, as if I was some distant acquaintance rather than the son who had supported them for years. The pain of exclusion lingered as I sat in my Chicago apartment that evening, a glass of bourbon in my hand. I always thought family meant something different. Growing up in Millfield, a small town in Ohio, I had been the responsible one, the achiever, the one who got out but never forgot where he came from. After graduating with honors and landing a job at a prestigious financial firm in Chicago, I made it a point to send money home regularly. When Jessica needed tuition for her fashion design program, I covered it without hesitation. When Dad needed a new truck for his contracting business, I helped with the down payment. When Mom required dental work insurance wouldn't cover, I paid the bill in full. For years I had been their safety net, their emergency fund, their reliable source of support. The first hints of distance appeared about 3 years ago, shortly after Jessica met Todd. He came from the Harrisons, one of the wealthiest families in the region, owners of several car dealerships across 3 states. Todd had charm and good looks, but something about him never sat right with me. He had never held a steady job, bouncing between positions at his father's dealerships and half-hearted attempts at starting businesses that inevitably failed. Jessica was completely enamored, though blinded by his family name and the lifestyle he pretended to maintain. "Todd says you work too much," Jessica mentioned during one of my visits home last Christmas. "He says people who focus too much on money miss out on actually living." The irony of this statement coming from a man who lived off his parents' trust fund wasn't lost on me, but I kept my opinions to myself. Family peace had always been my priority. Small exclusions began accumulating like paper cuts. I noticed Facebook photos of family gatherings I hadn't been invited to. Mom stopped asking when I might visit, and our weekly calls grew shorter. Dad rarely mentioned family news unless I specifically asked. 2 months ago, when Aunt Susan called to ask about my flight details for the big day, I realized something was seriously wrong. "What big day?" I asked, confused. "Jessica and Todd's wedding, of course. June 12th, at the Lakeview Country Club. Surely you got your invitation by now." My stomach dropped. I think mine must have gotten lost in the mail. "Let me check with Mom." That conversation with my mother followed, where she delivered the closest people line that still echoed in my head. After hanging up, I immediately called Jessica. "It was Todd's decision," she explained, her voice thin and defensive. "His parents are paying for most of it, and they wanted to keep it intimate. You know how these high society events are." "Intimate?" "Jessica, cousin Billy, who you haven't spoken to in 8 years, got an invitation. Neighbors from 3 houses ago got invitations." Her silence spoke volumes. "Just be honest with me," I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. "What's the real reason?" "Todd thinks you make everyone uncomfortable," she finally admitted. "You come in with your expensive suits and big city success stories, and it makes everyone else feel inadequate. Mom and Dad agreed it might be easier if you weren't there." The betrayal burned through me like acid. All those years of support, the thousands of dollars, the constant emotional availability whenever they needed me, and this was how they saw me? As some arrogant outsider making them feel bad about themselves? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I had been setting aside money for months, $50,000 intended as Jessica's wedding gift to help them buy their first home. Instead, I would use that money for myself. For once, I would put myself first. I opened my laptop and began searching for destinations. If my family didn't want me at this supposedly momentous occasion, I would create my own momentous experience. Somewhere far away, somewhere beautiful, somewhere I could finally breathe. They said, "What?" Ryan nearly shouted, almost spilling his coffee across the table at our favorite weekend brunch spot. Ryan had been my best friend since college, the only person who knew the full extent of my family dynamic. While I had always painted it in the best possible light, he saw through the cracks in my carefully constructed narrative. "Lower your voice," I said, glancing around the crowded restaurant. "But yes, apparently I make everyone uncomfortable with my success. The success I've been sharing with them for years, mind you." Ryan shook his head, disgusted. "So what are you going to do? Please tell me you're not still planning to send them that ridiculously generous check." "Actually, I have a different plan." I pulled out my tablet and showed him the web page I'd bookmarked. Bali. Specifically, the Amankila Resort. Private villa, ocean views, personal butler, the works. Ryan's eyebrows shot up as he scrolled through the images. "This looks incredible. But also, expensive?" "Yes. About the same as the check I was going to write for Jessica and Todd." "Are you serious? You're really going to do this?" For the first time since discovering the wedding slight, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. "Dead serious. I've spent my whole adult life trying to buy my family's love and approval. It's time I spent some of that money on my own happiness." Ryan raised his coffee mug. "To your happiness, finally. When do you leave?" "That's the best part. The wedding is June 12th. I fly out June 10th. The next week passed in a blur of preparations. I requested time off work, citing a family event, which wasn't entirely untrue. I shopped for resort-appropriate clothing, new luggage, travel gadgets, and everything else I might need for 2 weeks in paradise. It was during my luggage shopping expedition at Northbrook Court Mall that I literally bumped into Amanda. I was examining a high-end travel set when I backed up directly into her, causing her to drop her shopping bags. "I am so sorry," I said, immediately crouching to help gather her scattered purchases. "No harm done," she replied with a warm smile that reached her blue eyes. Though I think my new camera lens filter might disagree. My face fell as I handed her a small box with a clearly cracked glass filter, visible through the packaging. "Please let me replace that. I feel terrible." "It's really okay. These things happen." She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "I'm Amanda, by the way." "Clarence," I replied, extending my hand. "And I insist on replacing it. Maybe over coffee? There's a decent place just around the corner." To my surprise, she agreed, and one coffee turned into 2, which turned into dinner that evening. Amanda was a travel photographer who had just returned from an assignment in Thailand. Her stories of remote temples and hidden beaches had me hanging on every word. "So what takes you luggage shopping today?" she asked over pasta at Giovanni's. I hesitated before deciding on honesty. "I'm taking myself on an epic trip to Bali instead of attending my sister's wedding that I wasn't invited to." I expected judgment, or at least surprise, but Amanda simply nodded. "Family can be the source of our deepest wounds. Sometimes distance is the only antidote." Her understanding opened the floodgates, and I found myself sharing the whole sordid story. She listened attentively, occasionally adding insights from her own experiences with a family that never quite understood her choice to pursue photography rather than a real career. As we parted that evening, I had a sudden inspiration. "This might sound crazy, but you mentioned you have a gap in your schedule right now, and you've been to Bali before. Would you consider coming along? Not as a date or anything uncomfortable," I quickly clarified, "but as a guide, professionally. I'd cover all expenses, plus your regular day rate." Amanda looked surprised but not offended. "That's quite an offer. Can I think about it?" "Of course," I replied, handing her my card. "The offer stands until June 9th. 3 days later, she called to accept, and suddenly my solo journey of self-pity had transformed into something potentially much more interesting. The day before my departure, my father showed up unannounced at my apartment door. "Your mother told me you're not coming to the wedding," he said without preamble, standing awkwardly in my living room. I wasn't invited to the wedding. I corrected him. There's a difference. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Look, you know how these things get complicated. Jessica and Todd, they're young. They're trying to impress his family. And I'm what? An embarrassment? No, son, never that. He looked genuinely pained. It's just, you've done so well for yourself. Sometimes that's hard for the rest of us to live up to. So I'm being punished for my success? Success I've always shared with all of you? Nobody's punishing you, Clarence. We just thought, maybe this once, it would be nice for Jessica to be the center of attention. The implication that I somehow stole the spotlight when I visited home cut deeper than I expected. Dad, when have I ever made anything about me? I sit quietly at family gatherings. I listen to everyone's stories. I help where I can. What exactly am I doing wrong? It's not what you do, son. It's what you represent. The big city success, the money, the life none of the rest of us will ever have. Just by being there, you remind everyone of what they're not. For the first time, I saw the toxic dynamic clearly. My family didn't resent me for being arrogant or showy. They resented me for existing as a reminder of possibilities they hadn't pursued. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said finally. But I won't apologize for building a good life, and I won't pretend to be less than I am to make everyone else comfortable. I've booked a trip, and I'm going. Jessica has made her choice, and I've made mine. Dad left shortly after, our relationship fundamentally altered by the truth we'd finally spoken aloud. The morning of my departure arrived bright and clear, a perfect day to begin an adventure. My bags were packed, my apartment was clean, and my mind was set on leaving behind the family drama for a few blessed weeks of peace. Then my phone rang, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I nearly ignored it, but decided to take the high road. Hello, Mom. Clarence. Thank goodness you answered. We have a situation with the wedding. Of course they did. I'm sorry to hear that, but as you know, I won't be attending. That's actually why I'm calling, she said, her voice taking on the wheedling tone I knew all too well. There's been a change of plans. Jessica really wants you there after all. I sat down on my suitcase, suddenly wary. What happened? The story came out in bits and pieces, my mother characteristically burying the lead beneath layers of justification. Apparently, Todd's parents had certain expectations for the wedding. What Jessica had originally planned as a modest celebration had ballooned into an extravaganza designed to impress the Harrisons and their social circle. The venue alone cost $35,000, Mom admitted. Then there's the flowers, the band, the 5-course dinner. How are you paying for all this? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Well, we took out a loan against the house, and Jessica maxed out her credit cards, and we thought, well, we assumed you'd be giving them a generous gift. You always do. There it was. The real reason for the sudden desire for my presence, not because they missed me or valued me, but because they needed my checkbook. Todd's parents are threatening to call everything off if the wedding isn't up to their standards, Mom continued, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. They said it reflects poorly on their family name if the celebration isn't appropriate to their status. And what does Todd say about this? I asked. He agrees with them, of course. He was raised with certain expectations. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before responding. Mom, I'm leaving for Bali in 3 hours. My plans are set. Bali? What are you talking about? Your sister needs you. No, she needs my money. There's a difference. How can you be so selfish? The guilt trip, right on schedule. After everything we've done for you? That was the match that lit the fuse. Everything you've done for me? Mom, I've been supporting this family financially since I was 22 years old. I paid for Jessica's entire college education. I helped Dad start his business. I covered your medical bills. What exactly have you done for me lately except exclude me from family events and make me feel like my success is something to be ashamed of? The silence on the other end of the line told me my words had hit their mark. "I have to go," I said finally. "My car to the airport will be here soon. Please, Clarence." She tried one last time, her voice small. "We're family." "Yes, we are. And it's time this family learned that relationship goes both ways. I'll call you when I get back." I hung up, hands shaking with a mixture of anger and a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself against my family's emotional manipulation. My doorbell rang, and I expected to see my rideshare driver. Instead, Jessica stood there, mascara streaking down her face. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside wordlessly, allowing her into the apartment. "Mom said you're going to Bali." She looked around at my packed luggage. "So it's true." "It's true. My flight leaves in a few hours." "You can't go," she said, as if it were that simple. "Everything's falling apart, Clarence. The Harrisons are insisting on all these upgrades to the wedding. The florist wants another $5,000 for the exotic arrangements Todd's mother selected. The band canceled, and the replacement costs twice as much. The caterer raised their prices last minute. These sound like problems for the people who planned the wedding," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Which, as I was explicitly told, doesn't include me." Her face crumpled. "I know what I said before was hurtful. I'm sorry. I was stupid and caught up in Todd's world. Please, Clarence, I need your help." The sincerity in her voice nearly broke my resolve. This was my little sister, after all, the same girl I'd taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose tears I'd wiped away after her first heartbreak. "Jessica," I said gently, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. If I wasn't in a position to write you a check right now, would you still want me at your wedding?" Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "That's what I thought," I said, the final piece of my heart that had been holding out hope finally breaking. "It's not like that," she protested weakly. "I do want you there. It's just complicated. It's actually very simple. You and Todd and our parents made choices. Now you have to live with the consequences of those choices. I've made my choice too." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Amanda, arriving earlier than planned to ride with me to the airport. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, sensing the tension. "No, my sister was just leaving." I turned to Jessica. "I hope your wedding is everything you want it to be, truly. But I won't be there, and I won't be writing a check to save it either." Jessica looked between Amanda and me, a flash of something like jealousy crossing her face. "So this is why you're so eager to leave? You have a girlfriend now?" "Amanda is a professional photographer who's guiding me in Bali," I corrected her. "And no, that's not why I'm leaving. I'm leaving because I finally realized I deserve better than to be your family's ATM." Jessica left without another word, slamming the door behind her. Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Family drama?" she asked. "You have no idea," I replied, grabbing my bags. "But I'm leaving it all behind, starting right now." As our car pulled away from my building, I felt the weight of years of obligation and guilt beginning to lift from my shoulders. Ahead lay Bali, adventure, and 2 weeks of putting myself first for once. Whether my family understood my decision or not no longer mattered. I was finally choosing my own happiness. The moment we stepped off the plane in Denpasar, the warm, fragrant air enveloped us like a gentle embrace. After the sterile, recycled oxygen of the 20-hour flight, the richness of it filled my lungs and immediately began dissolving the tension I'd been carrying. "Breathe it in," Amanda said beside me, smiling. "Frangipani, incense, and a hint of clove." The smell of Bali. The drive to Amankila Resort took us through winding roads lined with lush vegetation and terraced rice fields that gleamed emerald green in the afternoon sunday. Small temples dotted the landscape, their stone gates adorned with bright yellow and white cloth. "Those are called penjur," Amanda explained. pointing to tall, curved bamboo poles, decorated with coconut leaves and flowers that lined the road. They represent a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual realm. A bridge between worlds was exactly what I needed. The physical distance from my family drama already felt healing, but the cultural distance, the complete shift in perspective, that's what I hoped would truly transform this trip from an escape into a rebirth. The resort exceeded even my highest expectations. Our neighboring villas, perched on a hillside overlooking the Lombok Strait, were architectural masterpieces of teak, thatch, and stone that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and organically part of the landscape. "This is incredible," I breathed, taking in the private infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. "Thank you for agreeing to come with me." Amanda smiled, her camera already out to capture the golden light playing across the water. "Thank you for the invitation. Not many people get to stay in places like this." The first few days passed in a blur of indulgence and exploration. We swam in the three-tiered main pool that cascaded down the hillside, enjoyed massages in an open-air pavilion with the sound of waves as our soundtrack, and feasted on fresh seafood caught that same day. Amanda proved to be the perfect travel companion, knowledgeable and enthusiastic, but also respectful of my need for quiet reflection. On our fourth morning, she suggested we visit a nearby water temple for the purification ritual known as Melukat. "It's about cleansing not just the body, but the spirit," she explained as we made the journey. "Letting go of negativity and making space for new beginnings." The temple was a complex of stone pools fed by sacred springs, surrounded by moss-covered statues and flowering trees. A local priest guided us through the ritual, explaining each step in careful English. We changed into special sarongs, made offerings of flower petals and incense, and finally immersed ourselves in the cool, clear water that flowed from stone spouts carved as mythical creatures. As the water streamed over my head, I closed my eyes and imagined it washing away not just the physical impurities of sweat and dust, but the emotional residue of hurt, betrayal, and resentment I'd been carrying. For the first time since discovering my exclusion from Jessica's wedding, I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of the tight knot of anger that had been lodged in my chest. That evening, as we sat on my villa's terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible shades of pink and gold, I finally checked my phone for the first time since arriving. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, 16 voicemails. "Bad news?" Amanda asked, noting my expression. "I'm not sure yet," I replied, scrolling through the barrage of messages from various family members. "But something's definitely happened." The story unfolded in fragments across the texts and voicemails, each more desperate than the last. 3 days ago, the wedding had been officially canceled. The final straw had apparently been when the Harrisons discovered exactly how much debt Jessica, Mom, and Dad had taken on to fund the extravaganza. Todd's parents called it financially irresponsible and suggested their son should reconsider marrying into a family with such poor monetary judgment. Todd, true to form, sided with his parents. According to my brother Mark's voicemail, he had publicly broken off the engagement via social media, posting a lengthy explanation about needing a partner who shared his family's values and financial acumen. Jessica was devastated. Mom was inconsolable, and Dad was facing the very real possibility of losing their home to cover the non-refundable deposits they'd placed with various vendors. The most recent message, from my mother just hours ago, was simply, "Clarence, please call us. We need you." I set the phone down, without responding, and looked out at the darkening ocean. "Your family situation?" Amanda guessed. I nodded and gave her the condensed version. "What are you going to do?" she asked when I finished. "Right now? Nothing. I'm 7,000 miles away, and for the first time in my life, their crisis isn't my emergency." "That's remarkably healthy," she said, sounding impressed. "The old me would already be looking for flights home," I admitted. "But being here, doing this ritual today, talking with you, I'm starting to see things differently. They made choices that led to this situation. Choices that deliberately excluded me until they needed my money. They need to experience the consequences of those choices. That sounds harsh, but I understand, Amanda said thoughtfully. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face their own mess. Exactly. If I swoop in and fix everything like I always have, what will they learn? That they can treat me however they want, and I'll still be there with my checkbook open? That night, I drafted a short text to the family group chat. I'm sorry to hear about the wedding cancellation. I'm currently in Bali and will be unreachable for the next week. We can discuss everything when I return. Then I turned off my phone entirely. The second week of our stay took on a different quality. Instead of tourist activities, Amanda suggested we experience more of the spiritual side of Bali. We attended a traditional fire dance, participated in a full moon ceremony at a seaside temple, and spent a day with a local healer who specialized in emotional wellness. In Bali, they believe that balance is everything, the elderly healer told me, as he pressed specific points on my feet that supposedly connected to different organs and emotions. When we hold on to hurt, we create imbalance in ourselves. This doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what caused the hurt. It means processing it, learning from it, and then releasing its power over us. How do you do that? I asked. He smiled, the creases around his eyes deepening. First, you must fully acknowledge the pain, not push it away. Then, you must look for the lesson it brings. Finally, you must decide what role you want this experience to play in your story going forward. Will it be the wound that defines you, or the wisdom that transforms you? His words stayed with me as Amanda and I hiked up Mount Batur to watch the sunrise the next day. Standing at the summit, as the first golden rays broke over the horizon, illuminating the volcanic landscape and lake below, I felt a profound sense of perspective. My family drama, which had consumed me so completely just 2 weeks ago, seemed so small from this vantage point, so containable. Not insignificant, but not world-defining either. Just one chapter in a much longer story that I was still writing. "Penny for your thoughts," Amanda said, joining me at the viewpoint. "I'm thinking about what our healer friend said yesterday, about choosing what role our painful experiences play in our stories." She nodded, her camera momentarily forgotten as she took in the spectacular view. "And what have you decided?" "That I'm grateful," I said, surprising myself with the realization. Not for how my family treated me, but for how it forced me to finally break patterns that weren't serving any of us. If they had invited me to the wedding, I would have gone. I would have written that huge check. Nothing would have changed. This painful experience pushed me to make different choices, to be here in this amazing place, to meet you. Amanda's smile in that moment, backlit by the rising sun, burned itself into my memory more vividly than any photograph could have captured. "I'm glad I met you too," she said simply, and for the first time since we'd met, the air between us shifted, charged with something more than friendship. As we began our descent, I turned my phone back on, ready to face whatever family chaos awaited. It was time to start writing the next chapter of my story. The call came while Amanda and I were having breakfast on our final day in Bali. Mark's name flashed on my screen, and I excused myself to take it on the terrace. "Clarence." "Thank God." My younger brother's voice came through, sounding strained. "Are you still in Bali?" "Yes, but we fly out tomorrow." "What's going on, Mark?" He exhaled heavily. "It's bad, man. Really bad." Mark had always been the family peacekeeper, the middle child who stayed neutral in conflicts and tried to see all sides. If he was calling me directly, the situation had to be dire. "Mom and Dad remortgaged the house to pay for the wedding," he explained. "They put down non-refundable deposits with all these high-end vendors Jessica and Todd picked out. We're talking nearly $70,000 that's just gone." I whistled low. "That's a lot of money. It gets worse." The mortgage company is threatening foreclosure because they missed the first payment already. They literally emptied their retirement accounts for this wedding, Clarence. The familiar weight of family responsibility began pressing on my shoulders, but I consciously shrugged it off. That was their choice, Mark. A choice they made without consulting me, for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. I know, and for what it's worth, I told them it was wrong to exclude you. But Jessica's in a really bad place right now. She had some kind of anxiety attack after Todd posted all that stuff about her family being financially irresponsible. She was in the hospital overnight. That news hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, Jessica was still my sister. Is she okay now? Physically, yes. Emotionally, she's a mess, and the extended family isn't helping. Aunt Susan and Uncle Pete keep saying that if you had just helped out like you always do, none of this would have happened. They're actually blaming you for not fixing a problem you didn't create. A flare of anger shot through me. That's rich. Did anyone mention that I wasn't even invited to this wedding until they needed my checkbook? Actually, Mark hesitated. I brought that up at the family meeting they called yesterday. It got pretty heated. Family meeting? About what? Another long pause. About how to convince you to bail everyone out when you get home. The bluntness of his statement was actually refreshing. At least someone was being honest about their expectations. And what did you say at this meeting? I asked, curious about where my brother stood. I told them they've been taking advantage of your generosity for years. That you've been the family safety net for so long they stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a resource. That didn't go over well. For the first time in our adult lives, I felt truly connected to my younger brother. Thank you for saying that, Mark. It means a lot. Yeah, well, someone needed to say it. But listen, they're still expecting you to fix everything. Mom's been telling the mortgage company that you'll cover the payments. Dad's promised vendors you'll settle the outstanding balances. They're all waiting for you to come home and make the problems disappear like you always do. The old me would have felt trapped by these expectations. The new me, shaped by distance and perspective, felt only clarity. That's not happening this time, I said firmly. I'm not going to enable behavior that led to this disaster in the first place. I figured you might say that, and for what it's worth, I think you're right. But what happens to Mom and Dad's house? Where will Jessica go if they lose it? She's living there again since the breakup. These were valid concerns, and despite my newfound boundaries, I wasn't heartless. I'll help them find a solution, but it won't involve me writing blank checks. There are other options they haven't considered because they've been counting on me to be their bailout plan. Such as, they could sell Dad's boat that sits unused most of the year. They could rent out the finished basement as an apartment. They could sell the vacation property at the lake. There are assets they could liquidate before losing their primary residence. I never even thought of those options, Mark admitted. They've got everyone so convinced that you're the only solution. Well, I'm not. And it's time they figured that out. I'll be home in 2 days. Tell them I'll come over then and we can discuss real solutions together. After hanging up, I rejoined Amanda at our table, where she was nursing a cup of coffee and discreetly giving me privacy. Family crisis not improving? She guessed. I gave her a rundown of the conversation as our breakfast arrived. What will you do? She asked when I finished. Exactly what I told Mark. I'll help them find solutions that don't involve me writing checks I'll never see repaid. Real solutions that address the underlying problems, not just the symptoms. She nodded approvingly. That's actually much kinder than just throwing money at the problem, though they may not see it that way at first. Probably not, I agreed. It's going to be a difficult conversation. Several difficult conversations, most likely. Amanda hesitated, then reached across the table to place her hand over mine. Would you like some moral support? I could come with you when you meet with them. The offer surprised and touched me. You'd do that? You barely know these people who have treated me pretty terribly. I know you, she said simply, and I believe in what you're trying to do. Sometimes having an outside perspective helps in family situations like this. Plus, she added with a small smile, I'm getting kind of used to having you around. The warmth that spread through me at her words had nothing to do with the tropical Bali sun and everything to do with the realization that something significant was developing between us. Something worth exploring further when we returned home. I'd like that, I said, turning my hand to clasp hers. Fair warning, though. It might get ugly. Her smile widened. I've photographed charging rhinos and angry baboons. I think I can handle your family. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I found myself looking forward to returning home, not with dread, but with purpose. I had boundaries to establish, toxic patterns to break, and potentially a new relationship to nurture. Whatever happened with my family, I knew I wasn't facing it alone anymore. I expected some resistance when I finally met with my family 2 days after returning from Bali. What I didn't expect was to find my entire extended family gathered in my apartment lobby when Amanda and I arrived home from the airport. Mom, Dad, Jessica, Mark, Aunt Susan, Uncle Pete, and even my grandparents stood in a tight cluster, their faces a mix of relief, anxiety, and in some cases, thinly veiled resentment. What is this? An intervention? I asked, setting down my luggage. We've been trying to reach you for days, Mom said, her voice wobbling between accusation and desperation. We need to talk, Clarence. I told Mark I'd come by tomorrow, after I'd had a chance to rest from the flight, I replied, keeping my voice level. This can't wait until tomorrow, Dad interjected. The mortgage company called again this morning. I sighed, looking at Amanda, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. Fine, but not in the lobby. Come upstairs. Watching my family file into my apartment was surreal. They'd rarely visited my Chicago home, claiming the drive from Ohio was too burdensome, yet here they all were when they needed something from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Who's this? Aunt Susan asked, eyeing Amanda with suspicious curiosity. Amanda Harris. She introduced herself with professional poise. I'm a travel photographer who accompanied Clarence in Bali. Before anyone could comment further, I redirected the conversation. Let's cut to the chase. I understand there are financial issues related to Jessica's canceled wedding. Mark filled me in on the basics. Basics doesn't cover it, Dad said, pacing the living room. We're facing financial ruin here, son. The mortgage company is starting foreclosure proceedings, Mom added, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. We could lose our home of 30 years, and it's all because of Todd and his horrible family. Jessica interjected, her face blotchy from crying. They encouraged us to spend all this money, then bailed when they realized we weren't actually rich. I took a deep breath, centering myself the way I'd learned during our temple visits in Bali. I understand this is a difficult situation, but before we discuss solutions, we need to address how we got here. What does that matter now? Aunt Susan cut in. The point is, your family needs you, Clarence. This is what family does. They help each other in times of crisis. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, family also invites each other to important life events. Family doesn't exclude members because they're too successful. Family doesn't only call when they need money. A tense silence fell over the room. Amanda quietly moved to the kitchen to give us some privacy while remaining within earshot for moral support. We made a mistake, Mom finally admitted. We should have insisted you be invited to the wedding. But that's in the past now, is it? Because it seems to me like the same dynamic is playing out right now. You made decisions without me. Decisions that put you in financial jeopardy. And now you're expecting me to fix everything without having any say in the matter. What are you saying? Dad asked, his face flushing. That you won't help us? I'm saying I won't enable behaviors that led to this situation. I won't write a blank check and pretend this never happened, only for us to end up right back here the next time there's a crisis. Jessica stood up suddenly, tears streaming down her face. This is all my fault. I just wanted a beautiful wedding like the ones I see online. I wanted Todd's family to think I was good enough for their precious son, and now everyone's suffering because of me. Her raw honesty cracked something open in the room. For the first time, someone was taking responsibility rather than looking for a scapegoat. "It's not all your fault, Jess," I said more gently. "You were manipulated by Todd and his family. But yes, you made choices that contributed to this situation. I always felt like I had to compete with you," she confessed, sinking back onto the couch. "You were always so perfect. Top grades, great job, financial success. Nothing I did ever measured up. The wedding was supposed to be my moment to shine, to show everyone I could be special too." Her words stunned me. "Jessica, I never knew you felt that way. I never meant to overshadow you. You didn't do it on purpose," she acknowledged. "But it was always there, this unspoken comparison. And then when Todd said it would be better if you weren't at the wedding, part of me was relieved. For once, I wouldn't have to feel second best." The honesty hung heavy in the air between us. "I think we've all failed each other in different ways." Mark spoke up from the corner where he'd been quietly observing. "Mom and Dad put too much financial pressure on Clarence for years. Clarence maybe enabled dependency without realizing it. Jessica sought validation through a relationship with someone who didn't really value her. We're all part of this dysfunctional system." I looked at my younger brother with newfound respect. When had he become so insightful? "Mark's right," I agreed. "And that's why throwing money at this problem won't solve anything. We need to address the underlying issues." "That's all very philosophical," Dad cut in impatiently. "But it doesn't solve the immediate crisis. The bank wants $40,000 by the end of the month, or they start foreclosure proceedings. And all the wedding vendors are threatening to sue if we don't pay the remaining balances," Mom added. "That's another $30,000. We've told them all you'd cover it, Clarence." I felt a flash of anger. "You had no right to tell them that. You made promises on my behalf, without even talking to me first. Because you were gallivanting around Bali with your new girlfriend," Aunt Susan snapped, "while your family was in crisis." Amanda chose that moment to rejoin us, carrying a tray of coffee mugs. Actually, Clarence was taking necessary space to reassess unhealthy family dynamics after being deliberately excluded from his sister's wedding. "And I'm not his girlfriend. I'm a professional photographer who was hired as his guide." She set the tray down with perfect composure, though that status might be evolving. I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face at her words in perfect timing. "Look," I said, returning to the matter at hand. "I'm not going to leave you homeless or being sued, but I'm also not going to simply write checks without addressing the real issues." "What exactly are you proposing?" Dad asked warily. "First, you need to liquidate some assets to address the immediate financial crisis. The boat, the timeshare, Mom's second car. That should cover a significant portion of the debt." "But we love the boat," Dad protested. "More than you love your home?" I countered. "Because those are the stakes right now." He fell silent. "Second, I'll help negotiate with the creditors and potentially provide a loan with very clear repayment terms documented legally. Not a gift, a loan." "A loan? To your own parents?" Mom looked shocked. "Yes, because gifts have created an unhealthy dynamic between us. This needs to be a business arrangement with clear expectations on both sides. And third," I continued before anyone could interrupt, "everyone involved needs to commit to financial counseling. I'll pay for that as a gift, but the loan is contingent on attendance and participation." The room fell silent as my family processed my terms. They weren't used to me setting conditions or boundaries. "Who do you think you are?" Aunt Susan finally burst out. "Acting like you're better than all of us just because you make more money." "I don't think I'm better than anyone," I replied calmly. "I just refuse to participate in patterns that hurt all of us in the long run. You can take my offer or leave it, but those are my terms." To my surprise, Jessica was the first to respond. "I think it's fair," she said quietly. "More than fair, actually. We've all taken advantage of Clarence's generosity for too long without considering how it affected him. Mom and Dad exchanged looks, having one of those silent conversations long married couples perfect. We'll sell the boat and the timeshare, Dad finally conceded, and we'll do the counseling. All of us, Mom added, looking pointedly at Jessica. Mark stood up and approached me, extending his hand. I'm proud of you, bro. This couldn't have been easy. As we shook hands, I felt a shift in our relationship, a new equality that hadn't existed before. Amanda reappeared at my side, her presence a steady anchor in the emotional storm. Your family needs time to process everything, she said gently. Maybe we could all reconvene tomorrow after everyone's had some rest? The suggestion broke the tension, giving everyone a graceful exit. As they filed out, Jessica lingered behind. I really am sorry, she said once we were alone. Not just about the wedding, but for years of resentment I never told you about. You didn't deserve that, and you didn't deserve to feel less than or overshadowed, I replied. Maybe we can both do better going forward. She nodded, then glanced at Amanda, who was tactfully organizing things in the kitchen. She seems great. I'm glad you found someone who supports you standing up for yourself. After she left, Amanda and I collapsed on the couch, emotionally drained but somehow lighter. That was intense, she commented, leaning her head on my shoulder. Thank you for being here, I said, taking her hand. I couldn't have done that without knowing you had my back. She turned to face me, her eyes serious. I meant what I said earlier about my professional status potentially evolving. I smiled, the stress of the confrontation melting away as I focused on this moment, this connection that had developed so unexpectedly from a chance meeting in a luggage store. I was hoping you did, I replied, leaning in to kiss her for the first time. Whatever happened next with my family, I knew things would never go back to how they were before, and that was entirely for the better. 6 months later, I stood in my parents' backyard, nursing a beer and watching the transformation around me. The physical changes were obvious. The property was simpler now. The boat gone. The collection of rarely used recreational vehicles sold off. The excess trimmed away to save what mattered most. But the emotional and relational changes were even more profound. Need a refill? Amanda appeared at my side, nodding toward my nearly empty bottle. I'm good for now, I replied, slipping my arm around her waist, just taking it all in. The occasion was a simple family barbecue, nothing like the elaborate events my parents used to strain their budget to host. Yet somehow, the genuine laughter and relaxed conversations made it more enjoyable than those stress-filled gatherings ever were. Dad manned the grill with newfound simplicity, no longer trying to impress anyone with expensive cuts he couldn't afford. Mom chatted with Aunt Susan, their relationship repaired after some difficult conversations about the expectations they'd placed on me over the years. Mark and his girlfriend Emily were setting up lawn games, while Jessica, the most transformed of all, helped arrange a table of homemade sides and salads. Hard to believe this is the same family that stormed your apartment 6 months ago, Amanda observed. Financial counseling works wonders, I replied with a smile. Though I think the real catalyst was finally having honest conversations after years of avoidance. The past 6 months hadn't been easy. The first few sessions of financial counseling had been tense, with old resentments and accusations flying. But gradually, as our counselor guided us through exercises in communication and boundary setting, something had shifted. Dad had taken a part-time job to supplement his contracting work, swallowing his pride to ensure they kept the house. Mom had started a small online business selling handcrafted items that was slowly gaining traction. They'd downsized in practical ways, focusing on needs rather than appearances. Jessica had perhaps the most dramatic transformation. After therapy helped her work through her feelings of inadequacy and the trauma of Todd's public humiliation, she'd enrolled in business classes at the local community college. She was now developing a small event planning company, using the hard lessons from her wedding disaster to help others create meaningful celebrations on realistic budgets. Clarence. Jessica waved me over to the food table. Can you taste this new pasta salad recipe and tell me if it's good enough for the Michaels' wedding next weekend? I obliged, sampling the dish. It's delicious. The clients will love it. Her face lit up with genuine pride, not the desperate need for validation that had driven her before. Thanks. It's way under budget too, which they'll appreciate even more. How's the business going? I asked, helping her arrange the serving utensils. Really good, actually. I'm booked through December now. Turns out there's a huge market for affordable but stylish events. Who knew? She laughed, the sound carefree, in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. I'm proud of you, Jess, I said sincerely. What you've built in just a few months is impressive. She glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot before responding. I need to thank you again for everything, Clarence. Not just for helping with the financial mess, but for forcing us all to face some uncomfortable truths. I was so busy being jealous of you that I never focused on finding my own path. Now that I have, I've never been happier. That means more than you know, I replied, touched by her honesty. And what about your personal life? Any developments there? A slight blush colored her cheeks. Actually, I've been seeing someone for about a month now, James. He's an accountant I met through one of my clients. Completely different from Todd, in every way. Different how? He's thoughtful, grounded, lives within his means, calls when he says he will. She smiled. No drama, no pretense, just genuine connection. It's refreshing. Sounds promising, I observed. When do we get to meet him? I invited him to join us today, actually. He should be here any minute. And before you go into protective big brother mode, he already knows all about the wedding disaster. I wanted complete honesty from the start this time. As if on cue, the gate opened, and a man about my age entered, carrying a pie box from a local bakery. He had a friendly, open face, and dressed simply in khakis and a button-down shirt. That's him, Jessica said, her expression softening, and he brought dessert without being asked. Like I said, completely different from Todd. I watched as she went to greet him, noting the easy, natural way they interacted. No performance, no desperate need to impress, just two people genuinely enjoying each other's company. Dad called everyone to the table as the food was ready, and we gathered in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. Before we ate, he cleared his throat awkwardly. I'd like to say something, if that's all right with everyone. We all fell silent, waiting. My father had never been one for speeches. The past 6 months have been some of the hardest of our lives, he began, his voice rough with emotion. Martha and I nearly lost everything because we got caught up in appearances and expectations that weren't realistic or authentic to who we are. Mom reached over and squeezed his hand encouragingly. But sometimes, the worst moments lead to the best changes. We've learned a lot about what really matters. This home, each other, honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. He looked directly at me, and we've learned that true family support isn't just financial, it's emotional, it's respectful, and it goes both ways. He raised his glass of lemonade. I want to toast to new beginnings, and specifically to Clarence and Amanda, who have some news to share today. All eyes turned to us. Amanda and I exchanged smiles as I took her hand, the small diamond ring on her finger catching the afternoon sunlight. We're engaged, I announced simply. The table erupted in genuine congratulations, the warmth and enthusiasm a stark contrast to the tension that had defined our family gatherings for so long. When's the wedding? Mom asked excitedly after the initial commotion died down. Next spring, Amanda replied. Something simple at the Botanical Gardens. And yes, she added with a knowing smile, you're all invited. The laughter that followed held no edge, no hidden resentments. Just shared joy and the gentle acknowledgement of how far we'd all come. Later, as the evening wound down and stars began appearing in the darkening sky, I found myself alone with my parents on the back porch. Amanda was inside helping Jessica and James pack leftovers, while Mark and Emily had left to catch a movie. "We need to thank you, son," Dad said quietly. "What you did, standing your ground even when we fought you on it, saved this family in more ways than one. It wasn't easy," I admitted, "for any of us." "The most important growth rarely is," Mom observed, patting my hand. "But look at us now. Jessica has found her calling, and a man who values her for herself. Your father and I are learning to live authentically within our means. And you," she smiled warmly, "you've found a partner who supports you in setting healthy boundaries." "The wedding disaster was actually a blessing in disguise," Dad added. "It forced us all to confront patterns we might have continued indefinitely otherwise." I nodded, thinking of the long, sometimes painful journey from that moment of exclusion to this peaceful evening. I never expected things to turn out this way when I saw Jessica's wedding announcement on Instagram. "Life's funny that way," Mom said. "The most painful moments sometimes lead us exactly where we need to go." As if to emphasize her point, Amanda appeared in the doorway, her smile still sending a warm rush through me, even after months together. "Ready to head out? We've got an early meeting with the wedding planner tomorrow." I stood, embracing both my parents before leaving. The hugs felt different now, genuine, equal, no longer burdened by unspoken expectations or resentments. Driving away from my childhood home with Amanda beside me, I reflected on the incredible journey of the past 6 months. From the pain of exclusion to the freedom of Bali, from confrontation to reconciliation, from enabling to empowering, I had transformed as much as my family had. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Amanda asked, echoing her question from that sunrise on Mount Batur that had been a turning point in my life. "I was just thinking that sometimes not getting an invitation turns out to be the best gift of all." She laced her fingers through mine on the console between us. "Well, I for one am grateful for every step of that journey, even the painful ones. They all led us here." As the car rounded the corner, taking us from my past toward our shared future, I silently thanked the universe for unanswered wedding invitations, tropical escapes, and the courage to finally put myself first. That choice, difficult as it had been, had ultimately given everyone in my family the opportunity to grow, heal, and build more authentic connections than we'd ever had before. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for those we love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. And sometimes the greatest act of self-love is simply believing we deserve better than we've been given, and having the courage to create it for ourselves. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between supporting family and respecting yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it meaningful, subscribe to hear more stories like this one, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family. Thank you for listening, and remember that true love, whether familial or romantic, should always lift you up, never tear you down.